Hey, hello everyone, and welcome back to the studio. So, we are talking today about China as part of our e-commerce world review. I'm so pleased you could join us, but even more pleased that we have our guest joining us all the way from China today, thanks to the magic of the internet. And we're going to look at something that was new to me and is making quite an impact in the biggest, most vibrant new market in the world. So we know all of that. So let's very quickly crack on with our session. As ever, if you have any questions, don't be shy. Put them into the Q&A area. We'll cover as many of those as we can as we go through. If we can't answer them, we will try and get an answer to you in the follow-up. So the slides from today will be available to you, and we'll email those as part of the post-event details. And of course, we will just be talking about a very few things that are going to feature in the upcoming China report, which will be out later in the year. Now, if there are things you'd like to know, areas you'd like us to look at, then we still have a couple of months, so we'll be very happy to take suggestions. Just drop us a note, research@retailx.net, and we'll get straight on it. So let us now just have a look at who's in the studio. So I'm Ian, I'm the CEO of RetailX, but most importantly, we are joined today by Li-Xiong Chu, who is a consultant at DR2 in China. So Li, welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you for having me, of course. I'm very well. Thank you, Ian. I hope you're doing fine as well.
We are indeed. Now, Li, we've chatted together for a number of years because you and your colleagues have been helping us with our e-commerce foundation and RetailX research. But in case people haven't come across either you or DR2 before, tell us a little bit about you and also what you get up to in China.
All right. Well, my name is Li, in short, from the DR2 Consultants Shanghai, of course. We're a Dutch company by origin, so our HQ is in the Netherlands, and then we have another office in Brussels, actually sits together with eCommerce Europe. And of course, we're very familiar with, work together with them on those reports as well. And then we have an office in Copenhagen in Europe as well, and also in New York since last year. So a little bit about our work is that we focus on e-commerce, of course, and cross-border e-commerce, where it's interesting because our China office, of course, is focusing on the domestic market in China, which is huge, of course, but also we keep kind of, we monitor basically what is happening in China, but also comparing it with the West. So we can see what's happening, and we can advise clients that want to come to China or the other way around. We have some Chinese clients that want to go to Europe, for example, as well, where our team in Europe and also working together with you guys, of course, is very valuable, I think. So yeah, that's in short kind of what DR2 in Shanghai does. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, we'll hear a little bit more about the work you've been doing in a few minutes. But before we go further, I was just going to jump back to some of the facts and figures we've pulled together. Now, for a RetailX report, obviously we pulled together the full financials and market drivers, but I just wanted to give a quick taste today of some of the things that we're seeing as we look at the market. So a couple of snapshots, if you like, of the Chinese market looked at from outside. So the first one I thought was interesting was just looking at a breakdown of where e-commerce is happening. So if you look back to Singles Day last year, we thought this was quite an intriguing point to see the platforms on which e-commerce is happening and the incredible market position of Tmall with 58% of activity, and also JD.com. And again, for those of us used to maybe an Amazon plus department stores, plus marketplaces, plus brands. It really is quite salutary to see this as, where the consumer points her browser. And we then had a look at the inbound effect from China and Chinese e-commerce companies, platforms, products into the European market. And as you know, we're located in the UK, but we've got people in Spain, the Netherlands, and Italy. And it's quite interesting how we all have different perceptions of the growth of Chinese retailers and Chinese platforms. And we can see that in sunny Lithuania, around 65% the cross-border traffic it comes from China, whereas in Germany it's a significant but still not dominant 40%. The UK is down at 43%. So again, major impact on home markets from China. And here are the devices that people are buying. Massive, sorry, these are the devices that people are using, sorry. A massive focus on smartphones. And again, I think China, along with other Asian markets, South Korea springs to mind, Singapore, are very much smartphone first markets. And this has an impact in terms of the demographics, the people who are using them, as well as the kind of sites, the kind of browsing behavior, and the services customers would expect. But I did have to point out at the bottom, we see smart TV and smart speakers are having an increasing role in e-com. And again, we have to be aware of our own biases here. I'm of a certain age where I'm quite happy, talking to my phone and asking Siri to buy me things. I haven't quite got up to speed with shouting at a speaker across the room, especially because the first thing that my kids did when we installed one to try it out was start ordering things themselves or trying to impersonate my voice. So culturally, it's interesting to see this very high level of acceptance already in the market. Then this was an interesting comparison in terms of price sensitivity. So this comes from the Global Consumer Survey, and there'll be more detail in the report. What I wanted to point out here is a maturity issue. So in a market where, say, smartphones are now a commodity, then we can see that people in China are much more price sensitive about consumer items like smartphones. Whereas when it comes to things like detergents and cleaning products, cosmetics and beauty care, in the US, which is a developed market, people are much keener to then buy on price. They're price sensitive. Whereas in the Chinese market, brand reputation, safety, along with a little element maybe still of luxury and spoiling yourself, are still there. So this is something we want to look at a little bit more to see whether there are opportunities in markets and from markets based upon the consumer maturity. One of the things we do across Europe is we look at the sales functionality that retailers put on their site in order to support effective selling. And we've just started the work in China. And one of the things that's been very interesting is to see how important having WeChat incorporated into your site, so WeChat Mini. I can see that Lee's nodding. He's probably thinking, only 94%. Do the other 6% not want to sell anything? But then the key part of this is live streaming. 75% are now offering this, and this is what Lee's going to be talking us through later, so I'm not going to spoil the thunder on that. But as we can see, a big focus on technology assisting purchases. And then we did some research on the Chinese consumer and how they approach shopping online. And I think the key thing we came out from with this is that the Chinese consumer is a research-focused consumer. They want to have information. So unlike a lot of European sites, the lean, mean, beautifully minimal, a Chinese website, just give me all of the details now and I'll flick through it as quickly as I can, but I'm not scared of information. I'm also very happy to get reviews, again, around the trust thing, and then nearly 40% say I want to use my smartphone. Same number say I want to see an item before I buy it. So a number of things coming together give you a picture of the Chinese consumer. And we then said, after COVID recedes, what things are you taking forward in your behaviour? And effectively they're saying health is very important, natural products, and a third of people say they'll support purposeful brands that are doing things for charity, and those who have supported workers and staff through the pandemic, with 35% saying they'll pay more attention than ever to quality. Now, remember, China is already a quality obsessed market, and this has been one of the routes for both Western brands that are looking to sell into China, but also for Chinese brands that are building up their quality footprint. So it's interesting to see that a third are even more focused on this going forward. So a few snapshots of the Chinese consumer, what she's up to, what's on her mind. Before we hand over to Li, did that ring true, Li, as someone who's living and working in the market? Anything there that we've got wrong?
No, I think for me, as you say, living and working in China, I mean, I'm partly a Chinese consumer as well, although I'm not 100% Chinese by nature, of course. But I think especially a couple of things are very interesting, especially the customer reviews, for example. I think in China, it's not only the reviews you can read on a review site, but it's also listening to other people actually using a particular product or service. It's very important for Chinese customers. So it's part of that research process as well, where they like to hear from first-hand experience how people experience specific products, for example. And then another point that is very important, I think, is the use of mobiles, right? So I think if you compare it a little bit with the West still, I mean, using a desktop or browsing on e-commerce sites via your laptop or your desktop is still a bit more common in the West than if you compare it to China. China, basically everything happens with your mobile phone, especially your day-to-day activities. You can't go without your mobile phone, basically. So, just as an example, if I start my day, I use my mobile phone to access the subway, for example. Then when I get to the office, I enter the office actually with a green code on WeChat actually as well. So and then if I get a coffee, if I go for lunch, basically I use my mobile phone all the time. So I think there's a slight difference in the customer order habits in the use of e-commerce, yes, kind of related digital channels. Yeah.
Good. Well, I think we'll be slowly and reluctantly catching up because I dawned on me yesterday that the last time I took cash out of a cash point was May 2020. So I'm now 13 months where I haven't been near cash. And when I go to the underground, the subway, even the buskers outside now have contactless payments. Instead of even throwing coins to buskers, we now have to tap and tip. So the world is definitely changing. But on that note, Li, you dropped me a note a couple of weeks ago with a really interesting report on a thing called live streaming. Yeah. And I was so focused on our broadcasting at the time. I was thinking, live streaming, maybe it's a new Zoom competitor. And it took me a moment reading a report. And I thought, wow, this is actually different, something we haven't seen in the UK. I mean, we've had concierge, we've had some levels of dedicated video support, but nothing at this level. And last week I saw an article showing this coming to the US in a bigger way and is seen as the savior of department stores. So
Of retail, yeah.
couldn't be more on time. So let me just hand over to you.
Yeah.
If you want to take us through, I will be slide changes. Just say next, and I will do the moving whenever you're ready, Lee. So looking forward to hearing about that.
Perfect, Ian. Thank you. Well, I think you already mentioned it in some of the details that you went over. Of course, live streaming is number 2 in the functionality department for e-commerce e-commerce channels here or platforms here in China. So let's dive a little bit deeper into live streaming and how that relates to e-commerce. If we can go to the next slide, please. So in China, basically, there's this notion of live commerce, which is a combination of e-commerce or mobile commerce. Actually, like I mentioned, in China, everything is done by mobile nowadays, together with live streaming. So how does it work? Of course, we'll look into more details about certain platforms here in China. So also just you see the QR code there as well for the people that actually have WeChat. You can scan the QR code and you'll be connected with me, because WeChat is kind of I would say similar to WhatsApp in the West, but I think in utility wise how we use it is a bit more expanded than WhatsApp probably. So if we go to the next slide, please. So just an overview of some of the digital platforms that we are common to in China, right? So the e-commerce platforms, Ian, you already mentioned a couple. Tmall, Jingdong are of course the major ones in China that everyone uses. I think there's some data that was recently released about globally which e-commerce platforms are actually in the top 10. And it will be important to see that actually Tmall is outperforming Amazon, but also because of the huge market in China, not only in China, but also because they're expanding to a lot of different countries and markets in the end. So then we have social platforms such as Weibo and WeChat that I mentioned as well. But WeChat, you can't really compare it one-to-one to WhatsApp, because WeChat we use here and every day for a lot of different purposes, basically. Then we have the entertainment platforms or the short video platforms or the live broadcasting platforms, depending on how you want to call them. So you have Bilibili. Douyin might be more known to you guys as TikTok, of course, and then Kuaishou. So these platforms were initially made not with an e-commerce I would say element in there. It was an entertainment kind of platform, right, where people can express themselves, and you'll be happy to know that especially the younger generation in China, they are very keen in expressing themselves. So I think that's also one of the key reasons why this live streaming has been becoming such a huge success in e-commerce as well. And of course, you have gaming platforms, and I haven't even mentioned the payment platforms, of course, that exist as well in China. So if we go to the next slide, just as a comparison with what is common in the West, of course, in Europe or in the US, you might think, well, what's the difference? The main difference is that in China, all these digital platforms are actually, you can define them or divide them in two ecosystems. So one is the Alibaba ecosystem, where you have your Tmall, your Taobao, and then payment system as Alipay, logistics systems such as Cainiao. It's basically all within the same ecosystem. And then you have on the other side, you have the Tencent ecosystem, with WeChat, of course, covering the social aspect or the payment aspect as well with WeChat Pay. And then for more e-commerce related purposes, you have Jingdong and Pinduoduo and name them. So
Lee, when you're in the market, are these seen as competitive? So would the consumer think, oh, I'm in this one, not in that one? Or is the consumer in both and the competition is really between them behind the scenes for the customer? So is this, Coke versus Pepsi, Apple versus PC, or is it like a bank where you don't really care, they're just banks, so you use whatever you want to use?
I think it's a very interesting question because I think the truth probably lies a bit in the middle, especially for the consumer side. As you can see here in this slide, on the bottom it says experience is like a borderless shopping experience, right? So for us as a consumer, you don't really notice the difference because you use both ecosystems in daily life. So one of the things on the front end for the consumers is that these digital platforms or ecosystems are quite integrated. So you don't really notice that you go out of one platform, for example, especially not within one ecosystem. And there is some competition when you get to the two different ecosystems. But like you mentioned, I think the actual competition is probably more on the seller side or the back end. So if you were a seller in China, that you probably want to be on both. So in both ecosystems, you don't want to limit yourself to one, basically. Yeah.
Cool.
Then if you go on to the next slide, basically, how does live streaming sit in those ecosystems? So live streaming, I think you mentioned a bit as well, right? About the functionality of live streaming within an e-commerce platform, for example. Well, in China, as we just saw, we had these entertainment platforms that were focused mainly on live broadcasting. So without the e-commerce elements in mind. And also, they were not part of these two big ecosystems. They are basically another digital platform made by different companies. But then when the integration came, it's basically it went very fast from providing a link from those platforms, from those live broadcasting or live streaming platforms to, for example, Tmall or to Jingdong. So basically, when you're watching something, they basically have this product listing within TikTok, for example, where you click on the product listing and you basically jump to, in the background, you basically jump to either Tmall or Jingdong, but for the consumer, you're still in TikTok. So you don't get the feeling that you are being directed to the different platforms anymore. So that's why the borderless kind of experience for the consumer is there, which is, I think, a bit different than if you compare it to the West. Because, like I mentioned, I think a lot still goes through desktops maybe, or laptops, where mobile integration or the mobile flow is not that smooth yet, and especially not between different platforms. And then, of course, as well, what you have is the functionality within the e-commerce platforms. So we'll go a bit into the data of this because it is interesting to see before COVID in China, the development of live broadcasting within e-commerce had already begun. So if you look at 2018, the China live streaming industry, was worth 4.4 billion USD, which was already at that time a 37% growth of 2007 compared to 2017, which is amazing if you ask me. And there were more than 450 million viewers, and this was in 2018 already. So if we go to the next slide. So, and then going to 2019, the year before COVID, this amount already raised to grew to 66 billion, which is 15 times the size of 2018. And then in 2020, in the COVID area, actually, the estimation was around 170 billion. So, if we then go a bit more in details about the COVID area, of course. COVID was interesting, let's say, for commerce and e-commerce, of course, because of the lockdown that happened all over the place. And in China, I think the lockdown was probably the most severe, but also the shortest in the end. But it influenced the development of the use of live broadcasting as well. So in the first 6 months of 2020, there were about 10 million e-commerce live streaming sessions hosted and around 560 million viewers. So this was an increase of the year before in the first half of the year in 2019. But if you compare it to 2018, it basically is already more than the whole of 2018. Next slide, please. So what are other interesting notions? Basically, like I mentioned, it accelerated the live e-commerce industry. Also, because of the lockdown, it basically helped retail industries in the COVID year. Because although the lockdown was very heavy in China, but maybe shortest, but a lot of retailers still were impacted in the longer sense because people in the beginning weren't very keen to go out and shopping anymore. So more and more was done online, of course. Now, also it has been catching on outside of China, Southeast Asia, like Ian was saying as well, of course, and also the West, like Amazon, where I think the functionality is being developed or it is there nowadays. It's just the implementation, I think, goes at a slower pace because of a lot of different reasons. I mean, trust and it's just a bit harder to implement these kind of functionalities if you compare it to China, where China, I think, in the end, is more of a market where things can be tried out first and see if it's successful. And if it's successful, the legal framework around it will be built afterwards. Whereas I think in the West, everything, well, we have to double check everything, right? If it's safe, if it's secure. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's just a different perspective of things in the end. So, and also, you can also see, I'll have an example later on of top influencers in the world that actually use Tmall live broadcasting, for example, to sell into the China market. Right. Next slide, please. So as an example of how live streaming kind of helped retailers in China, Burberry had to close 24 of their 64 stores in China during the lockdown period last year. Nike had to close 50% of all their stores in China, which of course for them it's killing. I mean, for sales it's ridiculous how the influence of that is, of course. So how did Burberry kind of react or respond to that? They used live streaming from one of their locations, one of the biggest locations in Shanghai actually, together with a key opinion leader. We'll get into more details about this notion of KOLs or KOCs a bit later. But what they realized basically is that in 1 hour they had 1.4 million views, and basically everything that she was presenting was sold in that hour, which is crazy, wow. Of course. But yeah, and it was, I mean, it was something that's not possible if they didn't have the live streaming functionality or live streaming kind of option for students. Next slide, please. So this is Kim Kardashian. Basically, she's using Tmall Global to sell into the China audience. Basically, it's a very short video, and what you will see popping up is a lot of responses or questions from customers that are watching the live streaming session.
So the first thought on this is you have a mega personality with millions of customers who talks to a subset of those about a small number of products that then sell out. Whereas if you're looking at, say, I don't know, a fashion retailer that is selling 3,000 brands, a couple of thousand SKUs from each of them, then how do you use live streaming for a very broad range of products rather than shallow product range but very deep quantity? Is this something that is literally just for smaller product ranges?
Well, it's I'll get to there a bit later as well. It's part of the whole strategy, your e-commerce strategy, basically. So that's why we talked about KOLs before, for example. What KOLs do, they don't work for a specific brand. I mean, they promote a lot of different SKUs or different products, basically, where they can push a lot of different products at the same time, in a couple of minutes, basically. So I'll get to that. It's very interesting to see how they manage it, basically, right? Okay. So here, we can see how live streaming is integrated and how prominent it is actually in an e-commerce platform such as Tmall. It basically, if you're on your mobile phone or Tmall on the app, it's everywhere on the first page. So basically, there's always a live streaming session going on somewhere, right?
This is a bit like having QVC or a shopping channel running all the time and you just dive into it?
Pretty much. How I also in the report that I wrote, I compared a little bit. I start by the comparison with because I'm from the area from like television sales or tel sales where they didn't really use celebrities to be honest later on, but and it was on TV all the time, and basically I think it's an updated version of that. It's just a development in this digital area that we live in, that it makes it more convenient, right? Because television sales, I don't know if, well, I'm sure you'll know about this as well. It wasn't that convenient, to be honest. If you want to make a sale, because you had to pick up the phone, you had to use the credit card, blah blah. It was a whole process. Basically, logistics was a nightmare. So it's pretty different. Where here, it's super convenient basically. And although I must say, for me, it's not the most common way of buying. I think maybe I'm too old. It's not for me. But if I look at my wife, for example, my direct environment, they would actually set their alarm for live streaming sessions by certain KOLs, which is amazing to me.
Wow! So it has taken over from TV in that case.
Yeah.
And so these are KOLs then.
Yeah, exactly. So going through the KOLs, this is Via, and we talked a bit about this, right? So Via is one of the two, Austin is the other that I'll talk about. They can basically sell everything. So it doesn't matter. They don't have a specific product category where they focus on. They basically in a couple of minutes they manage to sell so much. Here you can see to illustrate, Via drove 40 million sales in a single day, which is amazing to me.
Extraordinary.
So
and
then,
what does she do then when she's not live streaming? So is she stuck in the studio live streaming 15 hours a day, or is she out being like a Kardashian and living that sort of glamorous public life, and then rushes into the studio for an hour a day? I mean, to what extent is being an opinion leader her main business with a little bit of retail, or is being a sales machine with a bit of partying and, I don't know, opening primary schools? I'm not quite sure what KOLs do all day.
Well, that's the interesting question, right? Because I think there is a bit of a difference when we compare the West with China as well with this live streaming development. I think as we talk about KOLs or influencers in the West, actually they become sellers or afterwards after they've been like a social influencer before, like Kim Kardashian, for example. With these kind of KOLs, they actually they're influencers in e-commerce, like in sales basically. So that's their job. That's their daily job. So like you mentioned, they're stuck in the studio. Yeah, what they do most of the time is basically do live streaming. So that is pretty different, I think, when we talk about
so
influencers.
This is just like being
in the West.
A weather person, a sports commentator,
pretty much,
somebody whose
yes.
job is to sell on telly, who then just happens to become super famous and get a fan base for being a salesperson.
Pretty much, exactly. And the funny thing is, related to that, it has created a hype around youngsters, of course, in China, where people want to become an e-commerce influencer. So they see that there's actually a market in it. I can grow to become a e-commerce influencer basically. So what they, of course, who doesn't want to? Basically what you do is promote kind of products and services all the time, where you get if you manage to become one of the bigger influencers, you make a big buck as well.
So if I'm a mid-size European brand, I'm already quite famous, especially in Europe, but I've got some export sales. But I think, do you know what? I really want to sell more. Do I just get on WeChat, drop Via or her agent a note and say, could I feature please? It's just like trying to get a wholesale arrangement with a retailer. Or do I set up my own little studio and ring you, Lee, and say, you look like a nice guy with a good sales patter, come and be our live streamer and we'll start from nothing and build the 40 million audience ourselves? What's the real way to do this if you're looking from outside and thinking, I need to get a live stream presence?
I think that, I mean, it's a combination of factors. If we go to the next slide, actually, we can talk about a bit about this. So, I mean, using KOLs or these KOCs, it's very expensive. So you can't do that every day, right? So,
Sorry,
and like
KOC, so KOL
yeah, so
is
it's
key opinion leader.
Leader, and then KOCs is the key opinion customer, which is a whole new kind of industry in China. That's why what I'm saying, the youngsters want to become a KOC first, and from a KOC become a KOL in the end.
Yes.
So basically, what you were just mentioning is very interesting, especially for foreign brands, I think, that want to enter the Chinese market. There are different factors that you have to take into account because live streaming is so popular. I think, especially with the use of these KOLs, are most efficient with bigger events, retailing events, such the ones you mentioned, Single Day, for example, or recently it was the 18th of a couple of days ago, 18th of June is a very big retail event as well, where you can see that these KOLs will be very effective because they can basically sell as much in a very short period of time. But in the end, to build your customer base or a loyal customer base, you can't only focus on these KOL or the use of these KOL. So you still need to be consistent in your product offering, but also you have to really know your audience in the end. So if we go to the next slide, what is important in China nowadays, I think you mentioned a little bit about this as well, the Chinese customer, right? So in order to be able to sell into the Chinese market for European companies, there's much more to take into account. So live streaming is a functionality. It doesn't mean that if you use it, you'll be successful. The Chinese market is very competitive nowadays, where domestic brands are more and more, growing more and more. The need for domestic brands is growing as well. So as an example, you can see here as well, if we're talking about the cosmetics industry, in 2012, there are only, from the top 20 brands in China, there were only 2 Chinese brands, whereas now, or in 2020, it grew substantially to 10 already. And there's actually a lot of brands in fashion as well that don't only do well in the domestic market, they also have a growth strategy to go to the US, to Europe, for example. So it's about thinking about how to enter the market as well, right? So there's some examples here as well of global brands, huge brands that basically think, because of their, of course, I can't say one-to-one that they actually think that way, but from some of their campaigns, you can see that they haven't thought about localizing some of their messaging, which is very important for the Chinese market nowadays. I think, for example, Secret had quite a big falling out with using traditional Chinese elements with their lingerie, for example, which didn't sell correctly in the Chinese market.
Yeah.
So, and then if we go to the last slide, we touched upon this as well a little bit, right? So the perspective of the Western consumer and the Chinese consumer is a bit different. The market is a bit different, where the regulation or the legal framework in China usually, I would say, comes after. So because of the rapid growth of live streaming and live commerce, the legal framework is being built around it as well. So consumers are being protected. So there's, for example, last year there was policies that go against false advertising within these live streaming exchange policies. I won't mention them all, but it is being built around it because it's so successful in the end. So I think whereas in the West, I think we would do it the other way around. We build the legal framework first, where we kind of know what is possible, what we can do and what we cannot do, and then we push that. Which I think in terms of growth kind of hampers the speed if you compare it to the China situation. Not saying one is wrong or one is more wrong or more right, but it's just a difference, I think, in the market. So yeah, I think just to end my part as well, I think we've been discussing this or talking about this as well, right? So by the time the time I wrote the report, it's been a couple of months, but the changes and the developments in China go so fast. There are so many new things already to talk about. So I'm very open to anyone that wants to connect, of course, to talk about any new developments as well. Maybe as a nice anecdote for live streaming, I live in a high rise in Shanghai where one day in the evening I was heading home and I entered the elevator or in our apartment in our building around 7 or 8 p.m. I think at nighttime, and we have these small screens basically in the elevator that gives information. So then on one particular evening, I was looking at it at like 7, 8 p.m. and it was actually a live streaming going on right on that screen, where there's a QR code. Basically, if you want it, you could buy something.
You can shop
right there.
anywhere.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So, what are the big changes since the report? Then you said it's moving very quickly. What's the main change? Just give us one example that.
Well, I would say
the ink is dry, changed, or something new has happened.
Well, I think especially what I ended with the regulations or the policy changes, because of this rapid growth, the policy changes become more and more strict as well. So this influences a lot. Like we said, the competition that is very intense here, but with a more legal framework that is built around it, the competition will only become more tense, I think, in the end. Yeah. And especially what is very interesting as well is that the Chinese, if we talk about the Chinese customers, basically this focus on domestic brands or domestic manufacturing will only get stronger, I think, over the years. I think that's very interesting for Western brands to take into account. Not saying that because I think the Chinese consumer will always value Western brands because of their quality, because of their history, their heritage. But I think it's just for them to take into account some more localized words, I think, when they enter the Chinese market.
And we had a couple of questions in. I'm going to try and pull them all together. They range from things like, will this take over from retailers? Is it only retailers and marketplaces offering this, or can you set up as your own product live streamer? So instead of being inside someone's shopping app, you're on your own. Is this something that's going to be a new strand of retail? So you have stores, multi-channel, marketplaces, TV shopping, and now live streaming as a channel, or do you see it always within a marketplace or brand?
In China, definitely both. So you have, if you have your Tmall shop or your Jingdong shop, for example, you have that functionality, so it's right there. But also because TikTok, for example, it's a separate digital platform. I think they will develop a bit more as well. You can already, because they want to compete a little bit and they want a slice of the pie in the end, right? So basically what they're doing, they're developing their own e-commerce kind of functionality. So they go the other way around, where that's what I'm saying. The competition will increase as well in terms of the platforms that kind of presents or can promote your product in the end.
Excellent. I mean, for me, what's been fascinating is it's given a connection to things we can see, but I hadn't really put them together. So my son's into gaming and normally is totally bored at what I do. But when I was talking about this, he said, it's just like Twitch. Yeah, everyone's live streaming now. And then my daughters who are like, yeah, dad, whatever, they spend a lot of time on marketplaces like Depop, where it's really important to curate your followers, become a KOC. So it's bringing these behaviors together, which I think in the West, because we have payment in one area, platforms in another, and retailers, it's like three things coming together. Because you have this ecosystem where it's literally just a channel straight to the customer that does everything, you've been able to accelerate that far more quickly than otherwise we might have done.
The interesting as well what you're mentioning, because I think the younger generation, it doesn't matter where they are quite similar in certain behavior. So live streaming, it's about being heard for youngsters, I think, right? So they can express themselves by live streaming, but also they like to hear from their peers, from the same people as them about what they're doing, what they're buying and stuff. So I think it's a very interesting point that you're mentioning, because I have a friend that works at bol.com in the Netherlands, in an e-commerce platform there. And he's basically saying they don't they don't have an idea of actually putting live streaming functionality in their e-commerce platform, which is, to me, it's a bit crazy if you think about it, because sooner or later, I think you need that integration to actually
Yes.
develop further. I think, right, to have this this ecosystem as well, if you will, like it exists in China. I'm not saying that they should all implement the Chinese ecosystem, but I think Western platforms need to think about building that ecosystem
Exactly.
as well. Yeah.
And we've seen some, we did a podcast with Sophology a few months ago, where because all of their stores were closed, they had their staff in store walking around with iPads, sort of changing front and back camera and just showing customers the sofa. Live streaming, the fact that we all now spend several hours a day on video conferences, the fact that in the UK, increasingly your doctor's appointments are done via a mobile phone web chat. And it's, I think with all of these, people think, oh, that's new. And then you realise that all of the ingredients are here, and it just takes a moment to, to turn it into something.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in the end, I think the most important thing is connecting them, because in the West, it's not like the elements are not there. You have the digital platforms. I think you have, like you mentioned, you have payment platforms, you have the e-commerce platform, you have your marketing channels or digital platforms. It's just the main thing, or the most difficult thing, is actually integrating them into one ecosystem, I think. Yeah.
Well, look, Lee, fantastic. I think out of all the emails I get, it's great to have one that catches the imagination, and I really appreciate then you coming and bringing it to life for us. So thank you so much for that, and also for joining us from so many miles away. I hope I'll be able to get out and visit you as soon as flying is allowed again. Just a final thing, your report, we can put the link to that in the follow-up email.
Yes, definitely.
Okay?
No worries. Yeah. If there's any issues, also you can get my contact details, of course, as well. I'm very open to provide the report, of course,
Fantastic.
or to have just a casual chat.
Well, look, we'll take that as a bumper pack. So we will follow up after today with obviously a copy of the presentation, which has the QR codes and so on, and a link to Lee's presentation on live streaming as well. And we'll also update you when the publication date for our China market report will be. And again, we thought last year things were moving at a pace, but dear me, I think it'll be a whole new report again this year. So
looking forward to that report, actually. It's going to be very interesting, I think.
Well, you're going to be helping with it, so you'll know what's happening before most people. Lee, great to chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone else, for being with us today. Drop us your questions, because I'm sure there's more to cover. But for now, happy trading.